Muslims stand with President Trump because he promises peace. He promises peace, not war.
And Muslim communities.
We love you.
All right. Thank
What do you have to say about Gaza?
Sorry about that.
We've got to stop. We've got to really do something that's going to make everything come
I
back
can't
to
hear
peace.
him.
What we want is peace all over.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. President.
I personally believe that God saved his life twice for a reason, which is to save the lives of others.
Especially the war in Gaza, which has claimed tens of thousands of innocent lives, including women and children. We urge you to make a strong stance against Islamophobia.
Build beautiful communities for the 1.9 million people. We'll build beautiful communities, safe communities. Could be 5, 6, could be 2, but we'll build safe communities a little bit away from where they are, where all of this danger is. In the meantime, I would own this. Think of it as a real estate development for the future. It would be a beautiful piece of land.
Would the Palestinians
no
have the
big
right
money
to return?
spent. No, they wouldn't, because they're going to have much better housing, much better. In other words, I'm talking about building a permanent place for them.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد, the new shubha we're going to address is related to voting. And since it relates to voting, let me first give a brief introduction. We warned both in summary and in detail over the past 3 decades about the dangers of accepting democracy or participating in it in any way, because it's a religion of kufr. And among the ways to participate in the kufr of democracy is voting. Voting is a sha'ira of that kufr. Just as one should safeguard themselves in the West from other religions, from falling into other religions, and avoid participating in their kufr practices, the same applies to the religion of democracy. Voting is participating in the kufr of democracy. It's also shirk in legislation. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أَمْ لَهُمْ شُرَكَاءُ شَرَعُوا لَهُم مِّنَ الدِّينِ مَا لَمْ يَأْذَنْ بِهِ اللَّهُ. It's placing people, it's placing creation in positions where they exercise acts of rububiyyah and uluhiyyah over other creation. اتخذوا أحبارهم ورهبانهم أربابا من دون الله. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا يَتَّخِذَ بَعْضُنَا بَعْضًا أَرْبابًا مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ. If one's under ikrah, we would address this differently. However, who's under ikrah to vote in the West? Al-Shanqiti, the author of Adwa al-Bayan, rahimahullah ta'ala, said shirk in legislation and shirk in ibadah are one and the same. There's absolutely no difference between them. The one who follows a system other than Allah's system, or a legislation other than Allah's legislation, is like the one who worships an idol and prostrates to a false god. There's no difference between them in any way. They're both the same. They're both shirk. These days, a person can research every detail of every matter, including specifics about candidates that they vote for, and everything else. It's all at the click of a button. But they lack the ability to research with sincerity from the righteous, independent ulama whether voting is shirk or not, and to make desperate dua asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide them to the truth in this matter. As we're doing today, when doubts arise, the ulama have debunked them. There's no excuse in this day and age not to research and know the truth about these serious matters, because it's your Jannah in Jahannam that we're talking about. And let me say, beyond the Tawheedic fundamental matter pertaining to the issue of voting, How can one who fears Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cast their vote for someone whose hands are stained with the blood of Muslims, knowing that they will continue to commit various crimes against Muslims? Don't play dumb. Ever since the Ruwaybida leaders of Dalala in the West began to treat voting as if it were the sixth pillar of Islam a couple of decades ago, show me a single president during that time, or even double that time in the past 40 years, whose hands aren't stained with the blood of Muslims. And if they're unaware, we can enlighten them. Their vote is placing someone in power who will commit numerous, various types of injustices against Muslims. So I tell you, for those who voted, if you fear Allah, listen carefully. With your vote, this is beyond, aside from the Tawheedic matter. With your vote, be prepared to face the consequences of the crimes of who you put in power when you stand before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَمَنْ دَعَا إِلَى ضَلَالَةٍ كَانَ عَلَيْهِ مِنَ الْإِثْمِ مِثْلُ آثَامِ مَنْ تَبِعَهُ لَا يَنْقُصُ ذَلِكَ مِنْ آثَامِهِمْ شَيْئًا. The one who calls people for error and sin, he shall have to carry the burden of its sin, just like those who committed that sin, without their sins being diminished in any way. Voting is worse than that. No one forced you. In the foolish notion that one candidate is better than the other, has in practice over the past decades every single time been proven to be one of the biggest lies. Your imams are manipulators and liars when they tell you one candidate is better than the other. Yesterday I mentioned that we advised against voting for Biden, while the deviant ones were calling to support him. And the result of their call to support him, claiming its maslahah, was Gaza being leveled and its people being killed and massacred. Similarly, we advised against voting for Trump and Kamala in the recent campaign, while the deviant ones were on the podium supporting him. In just a few weeks in office, the results speak for themselves. Unprecedented talk about direct U.S. occupation of Palestine. And what lies ahead is even more troubling. I was unaware yesterday of the statements he made regarding his intentions to take over Gaza.
Mr. President, you've said before that the U.S. would buy Gaza, and today you just said we're not going to buy Gaza.
We're not going to have to buy. We're going to have Gaza. We don't have to buy. There's nothing to buy. We will have Gaza.
What does that mean?
No reason to buy. There is nothing to buy. It's Gaza. It's a war-torn area. We're going to take it. We're going to hold it. We're going to cherish it. And with the United States being in control of that piece of land, a fairly large piece of land, you're going to have stability in the Middle East for the first time. And the Palestinians, or the people that live now in Gaza, will be living beautifully in another location.
May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect Gaza and the people of Gaza. Gaza will always belong to Muslims. It's not the property of Trump or Netanyahu or America or the Yahud or the corrupt Tawheed working behind the scene who are allied with them. Palestine and Gaza are not mere political pawns or business deals to be exploited by the Tawheed. After leveling Gaza, the stray dogs of Gaza refuse to leave Gaza. So who can expect our beloved Muslims there to abandon their homeland? Gaza, along with all of Palestine, belongs not just to the Muslims of Palestine, but to the entire Muslim Ummah. Every Muslim, every Muslima from every corner of the world holds a rightful stake and a great responsibility towards Palestine, as with any other Muslim land. It's the rightful heritage of the Ummah whose ancestors from the time of Abu Ubaidah, Amr ibn al-As, have nobly spilled their blood on that land to establish Sharia on it and to protect it and honor it. whenever rhetoric like that of Trump emerges, and even if it's carried out, we know that victory is only getting closer. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا يُنْفِقُونَ أَمْوَالَهُمْ لِيَصُدُّوا عَنْ سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. They spend their wealth to hinder from the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They want to occupy it and invest in it. فَسَيُنْفِقُونَهَا. They will surely spend and continue to spend a Riviera of the Middle East on the skulls of our children, while the blood of innocent lives still stains the streets of Gaza. A sickening mockery of endless suffering. فَسَيُنْفِقُونَهَا. They will spend it. The next stage, ثُمَّ تَكُونُ عَلَيْهِمْ حَسْرًا. Then they will regret it. It's going to backfire on them. Ultimately, it will only return as a ghanima for the Muslims. ثُمَّ يُغْلَبُونَ. After they spent and reached a point where they believe they have complete control, they'll lose their wealth, they'll regret their actions, and they'll ultimately be defeated, and then Jahannam is their result. وَالَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا إِلَى جَهَنَّمَ يُحْشَرُونَ. Truthfully, anything uttered or done by the Taghut Trump comes as no surprise. His long-standing animosity towards Islam is evident from the start. The Islam and Muslims that Trump approves of is not Islam. It's the American Islam, and that's a totally different religion. We don't expect anything less from him. In fact, we anticipate much worse. This is just the beginning. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect the Muslims from his harm. Let me tell you where the real issue lies. The real issue is with those who helped put him into office and those who proudly boasted about it being a historic victory for Muslims in the US. So-called religious figures, those in charge of masajid. Trump winning the election was a historic victory, yes, for the munafiqeen. In all recent history, Palestine has been occupied by the Zionists. Of course, it's backed by the US, as we mentioned several times. Now, with the aid of these munafiqeen, they have grown bold enough to assert themselves as direct occupiers. This has never happened in history before by the US in Palestine. The ones who put them in power are the true enemies. هم العدو فاحذرهم. The true threat doesn't lie in the visible enemy that we can see, but in the ones who hide within the ranks, concealed among our own, deceitful and cunning imams pretending to be allies while in reality they're the very enemy. هم العدو فاحذرهم قاتلهم الله أن يؤفكون. Their justification for campaigning for Trump was peace in the Middle East. Yet when Netanyahu describes Trump as the greatest friend the Jews ever had, it becomes evident that your shirk in voting has brought a Zionist to power, one even more aligned with Zionism than the Zionists themselves. The vote of these khubatha who supported him brought the widest smile of joy and confidence to Netanyahu's face after the genocide, because he's standing next to his new strongest ally that they helped put into office. Some say, brother, excuse them, don't be too harsh. This is a matter of Tawheed they're misguiding people on. It's a matter of Tawheed. Calling their congregation to vote for Trump is a matter that concerns the blood and lands and rights of Muslims, all of which have been violated and will be violated more. They never learn from their mistakes. They repeat the same exact mistakes for decades in every single election. If you have a son who makes the same dumb mistake for 20 years, how do you address him? Trump's allegiance has consistently been with the Zionists Did they forget what happened in 2017 when he declared our Quds the capital for the Yahud and he moved his embassy there? When they voted, they didn't know who the war machine Trump was? As if he didn't already spend 4 years massacring innocent Muslims in Syria and in Iraq and in Yemen and in Somalia and in Pakistan and in Al-Baghuz. Al-Baghuz. Do you know what that is? It was a massacre. It was a genocide. No different from the genocide in Gaza. It was a massacre of Muslims just like Gaza. The scale of civilian slaughter was so vast that even the US military command had to acknowledge the killing of civilians. The horrifying images of women in Al-Baghuz burnt alive while holding and embracing their children will haunt our minds forever. Who was responsible for that? And let it be known that the genocide of Al-Baghuz must be recognized with the same intensity as the genocide in Gaza, if not more, because it was neglected and many rejoiced over it. This atrocity deserves the attention it has long been denied. I have fundamentally disagreed with the leaders of Hamas and their ideology for a long time. I've mentioned some by name and I mentioned the disagreements. But one thing a Muslim can't disagree on is that when Muslims face genocide and mass murder, it's only right for a Muslim to stand with the Muslims in Gaza in solidarity. It's not a disputed matter. It's one opinion and only one. There's no choice in this matter for a believer. Don't have double standards. The same applies for the genocide of Al-Baghuz. If you disagree with anything the people of Al-Baghuz did, remember they endured what the people of Gaza endured. And it's the duty of every Muslim to stand with them just like they stood behind the people of Gaza. A true Muslim sees the genocide of Al-Baghuz as one eye, and the massacre of Gaza, the genocide of Gaza, as the other, like two eyes in one head. There's no difference in the position a Muslim must take regarding both genocides. If you think otherwise, then go check your iman. Now, what I'm getting at is whose hands are still freshly dripping with the blood of the women, children, and men who were massacred throughout the Muslim world. The one they put into office. In Sunan al-Tirmidhi, لو أن أهل السماء وأهل الأرض اشتركوا في دم مؤمن لأكبهم الله في النار. If the inhabitants of the heavens and the inhabitants of the earth all took part in the shedding of the blood of a believer, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would cast them all into Jahannam. Do the angels sin? The angels don't sin, let alone kill or conspire to kill. They were mentioned despite their infallibility to emphasize the gravity of unjustly participating in killing a believer in any way. The apparent meaning of the hadith is that even if they all participated by verbally speaking or any other means without directly committing the killing, it would still be considered a grave sin as if they killed directly. Aside from the shirk committed in voting, what their candidate whom they voted for does, whether it's killing or oppressing Muslims or taking Gaza or the lands of the Muslim, it will fall upon their shoulders and upon their scale. It's impossible for all the angels and jinn and humans to directly carry out the physical act of killing an individual. The hadith is worded like that as a warning against any form of participating in the killing of a believer, like voting. Your vote in itself is a form of participation in the killing of Muslims and taking their land and then oppressing them. You consider your vote trivial, but according to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's serious. وَتَحْسَبُونَهُ هَيِّنًا وَهُوَ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ عَظِيمٌ. During his campaign, Trump sought support from anyone. He was willing to align himself with anyone who would tolerate him. He flew around like a fly looking for ways to land on. The mayor of Dearborn, a Shia, refused to meet with him on numerous occasions. And he condemned both Kamala and Trump as genocidal. And he criticized those who claim to be of Ahl Sunnah who welcomed Trump. The Mexican community and many other communities rejected him as well. Eventually, the fly found some ways to land on in Hamtramck and elsewhere. Those who claim to be from Ahl Sunnah. Those who run some of the largest masajid of Dirar. He crawled into the arms of morally bankrupt wretches in Hamtramck and beyond. Those who are spiritually lost, devoid of principle, indignity, and more importantly, aqidah. Typically, when you support a candidate in such a desperate situation and he wins, you get rewards, like positions in his administration. They sold their deen for no return. Instead, what happened is he filled his cabinets with Zionists and disregarded them like the disposable toilet paper they deserve to be treated as, even kicking one of the Rafida ones out of the inauguration program. خسر الدنيا والآخرة ذلك هو الخسران المبين. A brother this morning showed me 4 clips from non-Muslim activists who were mocking the imams who supported Trump. And they were asking, where are the imams who supported Trump about the issue of him calling for the takeover of Gaza? That's a legitimate question. After all, he's your president. He's the president for those who voted. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala resurrect them with him unless they publicly repent. What's stopping them from holding their president accountable for attempting to take over Muslim lands when they voted for him? That's the aqibah of participating in kufr. Humiliation in dunya and in akhirah. Among the hundreds of lies circulated over the 20 plus past years, in every other article was claims that Ahmad Jibril has been banned from a local masjid or some local masajid. And I've never once defended myself, and I don't plan to start right now. However, since we're on the topic, wouldn't it be an honor to be banned from such masajid of dirar? These are masajid that called for voting for Trump. They're masajid of dirar. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَالَّذِينَ اتَّخَذُوا مَسْجِدًا ضِرَارًا وَكُفْرًا وَتَفْرِيقًا بَيْنَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ وَإِرْصَادًا لِمَنْ حَارَبَ اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ مِنْ قَبْلِ. Masajid that have become basis for those who had previously fought against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in his messenger. Masajid that have become basis for supporting those who had previously fought Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his messenger, and whose hands are freshly dripping with the blood of Muslims. That's the verse saying that, not me. وَإِرْصَادًا لِمَنْ حَارَبَ اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ. And if you ask why, no one forced you. You could have sat this one out. Why? Why did you encourage your congregation to do that? وَلَا يَحْلِفُنَّ إِنْ أَرَدْنَا إِلَّا الْحُسْنَى. Peace in the Middle East. They would indeed swear that the intention was good. وَلَا يَحْلِفُنَّ إِنْ أَرَدْنَا إِلَّا الْحُسْنَى. Allah says, وَاللَّهُ يَشْهَدُ إِنَّهُمْ لَكَاذِبُونَ. Allah bears witness that they are certainly liars. How could what's mentioned in those articles be true when I believe masajid that participate in voting for Trump and interfaith, they don't have the sanctity of a masjid. They're masajid of dirar, and I explained what masajid of dirar are in my other lectures. The ruling on salah behind imams who promoted Trump and voted for him or called for voting for him is akin to salah behind Trump himself. If you have no problem making salah behind Trump, then go make salah behind those who supported him and called others to support him in their masajid. I and every muwahid, don't go to a masjid that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said about it, لا تقم فيه أبدا. Don't even stand in it. when I'm invited at times to some masajid, depending on the status of that masjid, I respectfully reject or delay or ignore sometimes. To those who are confused, there's no confusion in this matter. Those who voted, take a deep breath, make dua, and reflect for a moment. Do you truly want an imam or a leader tainted by the najasa of standing beside Trump or any other candidate, whether he supported them physically or virtually or verbally or by any other means? Do you want that imam to lead your janazah? Reflect on this and remember that Tawheed is your capital and the most valuable of all matters. Don't let anyone strip you of it. They will be nowhere near you to defend you when you stand before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. And don't be surprised if those leaders, those same leaders, in their misguided rhetoric, claim that this new U.S. occupation of Palestine is somehow contributing to the betterment of this ummah. There's plenty more to say, and since we went beyond the time, we'll delay addressing the doubt that we were going to address until tomorrow, inshallah. It pertains to the story.